Now let's move virtually to Africa. Our next session is on the fourth industrial revolution and how is it shaping up the digital economy. The session is moderated by Smart Africa. Smart Africa is a bold and innovative commitment from African heads of states and government to accelerate sustainable socio-economic development on the continent, ushering Africa into a knowledge economy through affordable access to broadband and usage of information and communications technologies. Now I invite the panelists. Onika Makwakwa Web Foundation, Dr. Busogi Moas, CMU Africa, Olivier Gakwaya, Smart Africa, Gerald Chirinda, Future Africa Forum, moderated by Garika Nongo, Smart Africa.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. So now welcome to this session in the All.ai 2021 Virtual Summit, where we're going to be discussing the fourth industrial revolution and the digital economy, particularly for Africa. We've got a great set of panelists today, and the next 45 to 50 minutes are going to be extremely interesting as we discuss what these new technologies mean for the development of the continent. So I'm going to have with me Onika Makwakwa from the Web Foundation. We're also going to have Dr. Busogi Moise from CMU Africa. We also have Olivier Gakwaya from Smart Africa, Gerald Chirinda from the Future Africa Forum. And this will be moderated by myself, Garika Nongo, also from Smart Africa. So without further ado, we're going to go straight into the discussion of the day. And what we want to do is for the panelists perhaps to start by introducing themselves, but not just introduction. Tell us what you feel AI or the fourth industrial revolution in particular means for Africa. Onika, if it can be ladies first, and I can start with you, please just give us an idea of who you are and how you feel the fourth industrial revolution can make a difference for this great continent.
Great, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to this conversation. My name is Onika Makwakwa, as has been shared. I'm the head of Africa for the Alliance for Affordable Internet, which is an initiative of the World Wide Web Foundation. So for us, we have years of working on digital inclusion, more specifically access to affordable and meaningful internet. And for Africa, all of us are very much aware that we still have more than half of the population that is online. AI offers great opportunities for us. I hear terms like leapfrogging, we are going to moonshot and do all these great things to begin to have tools to solve Africa's problems, right? However, I think for us, it's also an opportunity to double down on our goals for digital inclusion with investments in 4 key areas. One, in the infrastructure to make sure that we are connecting everyone. Before we connect the things, we must connect the people who will utilize the connected things. That we must also invest in affordable devices and perhaps an opportunity for us to evaluate this notion of being a mobile-only continent. How much innovation are we really doing on strictly mobile access, right? So affordable devices, preferably homegrown and easier accessible for people. Investment in digital skills. We're talking about the digital economy. It has to be an inclusive economy. We have an opportunity to engage in a way that includes everyone, including the market women at Makola Market in Ghana, at Maravastat in Pretoria. We want them to be part of this dynamic digital economy. So the requisite skills, we need to have a standard similar to when we had literacy standards for everyone. So investing in digital skills. And lastly, policy and regulation to make sure that we are indeed inclusive and not creating new inequalities within the digital space. Thank you.
All right, and thank you very much for that, Onika. Allow me to jump over to Nairobi. Gerald, I'm coming to you, just so if we can tell the audience who you are and from the work that you do, where you see the digital economy and also in the fourth industrial revolution for Africa. Over to you, Gerald.
Thank you so much, Garikai, and thank you for having me. My name is Gerald Chirinda, and I'm the founder of Future Africa Forum. And Future Africa Forum essentially researches, amplifies, and implements bold ideas and solutions, and works alongside policymakers to create tangible and sustainable change of the African continent. It's definitely a hard act to follow, you know, after Onika. What she said was really, really brilliant. If I could sort of boil down to what fourth industrial revolution means for me, I think it's probably three things: growth, connectivity, and access. I think this is what it brings with it. And, you know, we are all very optimistic and sort of excited about that. But I think we also need to be cognizant that it also has to be values driven. And I think that's one thing we definitely need to get into, because it's an intelligent system. It's an intelligent software. That's why it's called artificial intelligence. It's way more intelligent than human beings. And if not monitored, if not controlled, if not regulated, it could spiral out of hand. So in as much as I am extremely optimistic about it, I think we also have to be realistic and make sure that you know, it is values driven more than anything else. Thank you, Garikai.
Thank you, Gerald. I like that drive in terms of it being values driven. Olivier, I'm coming to you now in terms of the work that you've done, especially across AI in Smart Africa, just to introduce yourself as well and to tell us what this particular topic means to the work that you do. Over to you.
Thank you. So my name is Olivier. I'm a project manager in charge of emerging technologies in Smart Africa with a focus on AI, blockchain, and IoT. Smart Africa is an alliance of 32 African countries representing almost 815 million people, you know, and our aim is to transform Africa into a single digital market by 2030. And we also try to create an African digital economy. We also think that to achieve that, we need to build affordable digital infrastructure to interconnect the continent. And this will, I will join Ms. Makwakwa, to promote and facilitate doing business and investing across Africa. Then again, I'm joining the two intervenants before, and to accelerate the birth and the development of a digital society. And it's under those premises that we have started a program in Smart Africa to try to find a way to have the a development and a use of AI that is responsible, and to try to advance the African Union Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And that program is to try to set up AI in the continent. And it's according 5 pillars, you know. It's human capital. We need to make sure that people are prepared and skilled for what is to come. We have lab to market initiative. We want to promote innovation. We want to make sure that solutions are ready and concrete. Networking, collaboration. We need to keep those conversations open. It's not just doing something in one country. We are thinking about the continent, not just a country, not just a region. We need to open conversation about AI, the fourth industrial revolution, etc. Then we have infrastructure. We need those infrastructure because it depends. At some point, we need to have concrete project, and we need to interconnect people and systems. And the last one will be regulation. And regarding this one, Smart Africa is providing technical support to countries and our member states to develop national AI strategies. And we are hoping that in the future, we will have one common ground regarding AI.
Thank you very much for that. For that, Olivier. I think there's a lot of work that Smart Africa is doing around that, but there's a lot that people have rounded up. Dr. Moise Busoji, I'm coming to you just to give us a sense of the work that you're doing with CMU, and also just what this digital economy and fourth industrial revolution means around the work that you're doing and where you see it taking us. Over to you, Dr. Moise.
Thank you very much. So my name is Moise Busogi, and I'm from CMU Africa, where I am one of the faculty members at the school. So like AI, and I got a lot of work done in AI, even actually in 3D printing, which is relevant to what we're talking about. And one thing that I can say with respect to CMU, it seems like the world maybe is catching up to us, but we started very early in this particular field. So at CMU Africa, because we also understand how the world is going, we actually have a new department, which is engineering AI. And the goal is really to kind of touch on, like not really stay behind from the world, and making sure that we have young Africans who are ready to take advantage of these changes. So the change has arrived, and the question is, are we ready for the change? And that's where I feel like education has to play a big role. And so AI and all these emerging technologies bring some disruptions, and the question is, how can we minimize these disruptions? And I feel like education is one of a very, like the backbone of dealing or minimizing this kind of disruptions. Over.
Thank you very much for that. And I think all of you have talked about regulatory issues, but you've also talked about how this can be made relevant for people. Because, for a lot of people, this discussion about AI and fourth industrial revolution is all highbrow speak. How do we make it relevant to our people? I know, Gerald, you do a lot of work with young people. How would you communicate this and making sure that the fourth industrial revolution means something to the young people who are coming up?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Garika. Very good question. And I think I'll pick up from where Dr. Moise sort of left off, which is education. I think that is a critical aspect of making sure that it gets to the people. The second thing is infrastructure. If you look at Africa right now in terms of just how we are set up, we have a rural Africa, we have an urban Africa. And you'll find that urban Africa has more access to the internet to a certain degree. Not all of them as well, because depending on the country you're in, connectivity can be very expensive. But the rural has very little access to the internet. So the infrastructure aspect, which Dr. Olivier and Onika mentioned earlier, is very critical now. We need to be able to make sure that as we are educating, socializing the issue of artificial intelligence, we are doing so in an inclusive manner. We are not just doing so within the urban settings where people have access. And that inclusive manner allows us to then view where the gaps lie and why there's no access in certain places. And you begin to address that issue. So you'll find in the rural settings, maybe for the most part, is really ground zero type infrastructure. This is the fourth industrial revolution, but we still don't have, the second and maybe the third type of infrastructure within rural settings. So electricity is I think a key key infrastructure item that's needed to be able to drive artificial intelligence. So we have to then take a step back and say, in as much as we are driving this, let's make sure that there's access for everyone. That way, when we are educating everyone has that awareness, especially young people are aware in rural settings as well as in urban settings. The beauty though with AI is the cost of doing so is probably less than trying to do so in person, because you are leveraging off technology, right? You are now using platforms. You don't have to empower maybe thousands of teachers and require lots of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure. It's actually in someone's home, they begin to learn, they begin to actually understand, not just AI itself, but general education, which makes the wholesome person. So I think education is one of the most important pillars. And then we have to then address or look at what are the impediments to making sure that people are not understanding what this is. Because for the most part, to be honest, it has been a high-level conversation. It has been a conversation being driven a lot by young, smart, exposed people, techies who have brilliant ideas. So how do we, bring it down to the local man? I think is something that's important and show the value.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Gerald. And, we'll tackle the discussion, I think, in the next question round about the impediments to development of AI and the digital economy across Africa. But I've picked up that you've talked about access, you've talked about capacity building, and at the end of the day, you've talked about inclusivity. And I remember, Onika, in your introduction, you talked about how AI and the digital economy has to be relevant to even the person who's at the market. I'm thinking of my grandmother in rural central Zimbabwe, whose mainstay is cotton farming. Onika, tell me, how would we make the fourth industrial revolution and the digital economy relevant to someone like her? Because that is 60% of the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Gerald hits this on the head when he mentions that, we've very much been having a very high level conversation about this without really connecting it to Africa's realities, right? So for example, when we've gone to a lot of the tech shows, including those hosted in the continent, the expos are showing us virtual snowboarding examples of how AI is utilized, which is completely irrelevant for us. But also when you look at our innovation, we've really been innovating for the Western gaze for the most part. We want to be the next Uber of Africa. We want to be the next Amazon of Africa. Can we imagine an Amazon of Africa that looks more like Makola Market than the Amazon we are imagining right now? And how would we go about that innovation to include the women in the market? So for me, I think what is important is really that we move forward by also breaking down the silos. The biggest divide absolutely is the rural and urban divide at the moment. And, it's a historic divide. It's not just only in technology. It existed in access to education, in work, in healthcare, in a whole lot of things. So we have to continue to work on addressing the inequalities that currently exist, but find an opportunity to break down the silos now. So for example, there is no reason why a rural electrification project cannot now include connectivity alongside. So infrastructure sharing and managing deployment of utilities simultaneously to save cost, but also with the understanding that they are codependent. You can't have connectivity without electricity. So there's a lot of investment. If you look at even the development donors, what they've put in place for electrification initiatives, perhaps we go back and look at those initiatives and have a conversation around how we introduce fiber, laying down fiber alongside those electrical ventures. So that's just one. But I think another silo that we need to break is this notion that, for our children to be prepared for the fourth industrial revolution, we are focusing on STEM. I'd like to call it STEAM. We need the arts and humanities. So really what needs to be mainstreamed is the technology, not that it should be in science, engineering, and technology. It's that we are mainstreaming technology across the board. So perhaps it's a STEAM focus as opposed to a STEM focus, where we bring in the arts and humanities so that we can begin to tease out the examples of how this is relevant to them. And just in closing, I want to give you one example. There's a group of young girls who are coding in Cape Town. One of the apps that they developed was an app for grannies to queue virtually at the public clinic. So instead of our grannies going to the public clinic and waiting for 4 hours before they see the nurse, they are working with them, going to their homes in the townships and helping them begin to queue so that the granny only goes to the clinic just in time for them to wait for maybe 20 minutes or less and then be seen by the nursing sister. So for me, it's when we begin to look at examples like those, that's something that's relevant to us, because we, are a queuing society. I mean, I hate to say it, we queue for everything. So can we just start with that as a good example? South Africa deployed e-queuing for a vaccination. However, we wanted to deploy e-queuing for vaccination to a population that spends 4 hours every month to receive their monthly subsistence on the queue. So we need to find the opportunities in what we are already doing right now to introduce and socialize an AI solution instead of trying to create brand new Amazons and Ubers. No offense against those two companies.
No.
I
think, yes, certainly no offense taken, but what you've just unpacked, I think could be conversation for us for the entire day, but you've made some very strong points. Especially, look, the point about STEAM, I think touches close to my heart as a man of the arts in a tech world. But I also liked the idea that you were saying we basically need to make what we have relevant to our scenario as Africa. And Dr. Busogi, I'm coming to you because, at CMU, you're in charge of sharpening these minds at tertiary level. How then can we use institutions much like yourselves to be teaching Africa-centric and Africa-relevant AI development and digital economy lessons? Is that possible?
Absolutely. I feel like it's actually possible. And obviously it does touches on many things that people did talk about. Like, so when you think about AI, when you think maybe in particular the machine learning, you think about the data. So you need to have data. And sometimes we are just driven on where the data is. And if the data is here, then we kind of forced to actually work on that problem because we have all the tools we need. So I like, some of the work that have been done in Rwanda, where they have a lot of collection of Kinyarwanda data. And now if I'm teaching natural language processing, I no longer have to actually go to Kaggle and get some English languages. I actually need to give the homework on the Kinyarwanda language, and all the applications that are going to be developed are actually going to support our local languages. So one way, so it's kind of like an effort that has to be inclusive as well, where everybody contributing, whether you bring in your data, whether you bring in your problem, so that, because sometimes we are also in the bubble where you feel like you're reading the papers written by other colleagues outside, and you get caught off in trying to catch up with them. And so that there's another component which has to do with like, how do you value impact? So in the research area, sometimes like the publications and citation is number one in terms of the promotion. But if I somehow come up with just some really low innovative idea that changes the waiting line in a hospital, I'm just using existing innovation, just applying to our problem, but with a huge impact in our society, I'm probably not going to be able to publish in the best journals. And so like there's a hindrance in how do we value local impact so that even a researcher like me can actually be, like acknowledged, even though he didn't, invent the new Amazon. Yeah.
I like that. And that's a powerful question, which I think we'll ask each of our panelists at the end. How do you value impact? Because that's a very powerful question. Thank you very much, Dr. Busogi. Olivier, I'm coming to you. You recently co-authored with some partners actually here, a blueprint for Africa on AI, ethical AI. And when Gerald in his intro came in, he spoke about a value system. And I take it that touches on the ethical AI. Now, there are a lot of exciting sort of recommendations that are within there. To pick up on this discussion, do you see those recommendations being practical for Africa? And if they are, I'd love to hear one or two that you think can turn Africa at the moment. Olivier, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Gerald. So yes, we did AI blueprints, which define a roadmap for an inclusive approach to to AI, and a colleague of Ms. Makwakwa, Dr. Busogi, were present during the elaboration of the document. So this document is something that we wanted to be human-centered, and to make sure that we are not excluding women and girls or any other vulnerable group. And this was actually the colleague of Ms. Makwakwa. It was her very good point, and she wanted to make sure that we address those topics. The situation here is, like I explained a little bit early on, it's to the fiber approach. You know, we want to, for example, for the human capital, we want to make sure that this kind of education is not only at the university parts, it's also something that needs to start early on. It's like primary school, secondary school. We want to make sure that we shape the mind of our young people to make them able to have critical thinking, to have mathematical skills, to have to allow them to have coding skills, because obviously you will have to program the future AI. And this is the reason why I'm joining Dr. Busogi. It's not about creating the new Amazon, or Ms. Makoko has said that. It's not about creating the new Amazon. It's about creating something that it's belonging to our context. It's something that we have our own history. We have our own way to say things. We have our own power, and we need to embrace it and to show it. Next to that, we have infrastructure. Obviously, we want to create. We need the computational power to capture data, to use it, and this data management needs to happen. So we will need those infrastructure. And in that document, we also propose a few regulation, but all of this is just an holistic approach, and we will adapt this document to the countries, because each country in Africa has a different context, and overall we have our own context too, but we want to make sure that it's adapted to each countries.
Thank you very much for that, Olivier. And I like the way you said that we've got our power. And one of the things that I've taken from all our panelists, from Gerald, Onika, Moise, and Olivier, is optimism. Optimism that Africa can definitely do it. But within that optimism, tell us, and Moise, I'm coming to you first. What really are the challenges that are stopping us? Because we can do it, but we're not fully doing it at the moment, are we?
No, I don't believe we are doing it. And so this is where like the challenge comes in, where like you feel like when you do all the effort and somebody else, it's like our power is kind of determined by our weakest link in most of the time. And which means like if, you know, women are not powered, then we all suffer because they represent a huge part of our population. So if the education is only available to the rich, like for instance, when you think about a lot of universities, it's an understanding that maybe one or two give proper education that can kind of like make you compete to the world. So how can we take advantage of this accessibility or access that AI can give us, and maybe work as a group, like rather than saying, okay, CMU, do your best, this guy, do your best, like how can we collectively work together and somehow have a way of follow-up on every kind of, because many times there's a good project and it's done and you come back, you don't see even the impact, right? So how can we be accountable to everything that we do and somehow reassess ourselves on every step we make and see, like, if we are here, next year we are here, like what have we achieved? What did we learn and what can we change? And if we start with that, I feel I really I'm very optimistic because I see it in our students. I see how many, like every year, the number of innovative ideas that can turn into companies, they grow every day, right? But how can the government help these innovative minds? Because we can do our best to educate them, but they need some support to grow, in the real world. So that kind of collaborative effort is the one that's needed.
Absolutely, and I get the sense that you're saying we're missing, like you just said, that collaborative effect. And you also mentioned our excluded groups. Recently, I think a report says that the exclusion of women within our economy generally is costing Africa $1 trillion. Those are big numbers, which I'm sure Onika will tackle. But before I get to you, Onika, I'm jumping to you, Gerald, about this system about inclusion, because I know you work with various ecosystems. Are we saying that our ecosystems are not working like a full ecosystem, that we are not pulling in the same direction?
That's correct, Karikai. I think sadly that seems to be the reality at the moment. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, there's context, right? Our context differs. Sometimes when we are speaking about the African continent, we are all, we are not one country. We are all different. There's the regional aspects, there's the individual country aspects. So harmonizing 54 different countries is not an easy task. Regulation across these countries is very different. You'll realize that in one country, they are more adapt to using technology than they are in certain countries. I mean, you still have countries where just access itself in terms of if the internet is working well today, people sort of celebrate. And then you have certain countries where the reliance of the internet is so strong, and the adaptability of the people within that society is so strong, and the government actually champions technology, the use of technology, etc. So that context makes it very difficult for us to not pull in the same direction, because our levels of ambitions and aspirations, I think, at a country level tend to differ. Some countries see the value more than others do. Some see more of a harm as opposed to others. So I think until we get to a point where there is a basic sort of understanding in terms of, at the very basic level, this is what we need for connectivity. I think it's going to be very difficult. But I'm optimistic, because things such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area should allow for us to say, at a very basic level, let us make sure that cross-border payments are very easy to do. Let us make sure that trade is very easy to do between borders. The beautiful thing, though, Garikai, is at an continental level, you have institutions which are already working on that, right? The Afrexim Bank recently has what they call the Pan-African Payment Settlement System, which I think is a game changer on its own. Sitting in Nairobi, I can make a purchase in Rwanda in my local shillings currency, right? And then because of that platform, they will then manage, whatever arbitrage and so forth that takes place. So if at a continental level, our institutions begin to shape the direction, it's much easier for countries to fall in line. And it's much easier for them to actually adapt, because there is a continental aspiration and a framework which has been set for us to be able to work together. But other than that, I think we will then see siloed working if we don't have our continental institutions actually championing and driving this. Recently, we've got the Africa CDC, where we now need to make sure, hey, they've done a fantastic job in as far as the response to COVID-19 is concerned. How can we now make sure that from a health perspective, there's some sort of harmonization in terms of technology and access and so forth? I mean, I shouldn't struggle to travel from one country to the next, because one country is doing certain things manually and the other is doing digitally. So they don't, speak to each other. So I think at an institutional level is where we can be able to deal with it. And I think Smart Africa has a very big role to play, in making sure that this sort of harmonization takes place. And we look forward to holding you accountable to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Gerald. And institutions certainly need to be held accountable. And I think we do believe that certainly strong economies, whether digital or otherwise, are built from the strength of strong institutions. Onika, I'm coming to you, and I've got many things to ask you. I think just to tap on what Moise and Gerald has talked about. Gerald also talked about regulation, which Olivier, I'm coming to you about. But Onika, let's talk about inclusion. we have for so long excluded 50% of our population, 51. What impact does that have, particularly for the digital economy and the fourth industrial revolution?
It has a huge impact. You know, the exclusion of women. In fact, we've just recently done a study, which you mentioned, on the cost of exclusion in over 20 countries, low and middle income countries, majority of them in this continent. And the economies are actually losing over $1 trillion annually for excluding women. So you can imagine if we have this vision of a dynamic digital economy, and when you look at digital exclusion of women already, women are not as well represented online as men are. They are the ones who are dealing with affordability issues, who are hit the hardest by affordability issues. After all, they are not getting equal pay for equal work, right? So naturally, the cost of a small device, an entry-level smartphone in this region, costs as much as a microwave for most households. So you can imagine if we have to make a decision about to outfit every individual in the house with a smartphone, or to purchase a microwave that creates cooking much faster and serves everyone in the household, how that would actually shape out. So, I think a big challenge for us is closing our inequalities. They are not just only online. These are societal inequalities that exist and are just kind of, exaggerated also in our online spaces. But for me, I think the biggest thing is that we need the leadership that champions digital inclusion. That's something we have not seen enough of. Before we can, in fact, I'm really looking forward to the people who are big champions of Pan-Africanism, because before we trade goods, we have to unite as a people, right? And so for me, digital has been the best, fast, and quickest way. I felt it when Nigerians were not on Twitter all of a sudden. Like, my African world was missing someone and some level of activity. I feel it when there's an internet shutdown in Ethiopia, because there's a perspective there in how we engage in public platforms that gets missed. But also it's an opportunity for us to know more about each other, to learn about each other, in a way that will create the environment required for an open borders type of trade environment, right? So we are missing out an opportunity of uniting as a continent and seeing digital as the places where we can actually begin to unite before we deal with the issues of visas, which is a whole other mess, and customs duties. We gotta get people uniting and seeing us as one continent. And so far, digital has done that far more than the train, the bus, or the aeroplane. And I would like to see governments championing that kind of digital inclusion.
I like that. And I think that's powerful in terms of Africa uniting. And I'm going to throw this to a man who's with an organization that is set to create a single digital market for the continent by 2030. Olivier, is this happening? And I also want us to touch on regulation as well, in terms of how we are bringing people together to drive the fourth industrial revolution. Over to you.
Okay, so that's a large topic. Gerald said it. It's actually, yes, our mandate. We want to make sure that we go into the same direction. We might not want to achieve the same thing, but at the end of the day, we want Africa to be able to sit at the big table. We don't want just to have small countries representing themselves. We want to represent as a united front. To follow up on a few things, we have a digital economy blueprint that was launched last year, that was championed by the Republic of Kenya. We have the e-payment for trade across Africa, which is a blueprint that has been championed by Ghana. We have a capacity building and ICT skill blueprint that has been launched by the Republic of Burkina Faso. So we are doing works with countries championed by country, and we are trying to make it in a way that it's not just, yes, we want to create digital skills just in Burkina Faso, but this is a document that will serve as a foundation for the entire continent in a way of a roadmap to achieve a certain topic, but within the alliance of member states. So it also includes the blueprint that we have developed, the AI for Africa, is not just something that has been championed by South Africa. You know, it's just, we want something that will be the foundation of a work that's going to harmonize. And for example, we have a working group on data protection, which will be, it's not about redoing what AU has been done. It's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about making sure that each country can find themselves represented in the this document, or everything that can be established later on. And it's also the same for the blueprint. We don't want each country to think, okay, no, it's championed by one country and we cannot adapt it for us. No, you can, and it's a work that we do as Smart Africa.
Thank you very much for that, Olivier. And I think these are things that have been talked about by other panelists as well in terms of e-payments, the digital economy, even blueprints for AI and bringing the continent together. So with the South Africa member states, I think there's a lot of collective work that's happening. There's so much to unpack, but we're getting to the tail end of this discussion, and the hope that we can take this discussion offline and into the real world and continue to do work together. But I'm going to ask each of our panelists just to give us one optimistic view of what we need to do next to make Africa take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution and the digital economy. And let me say, ladies first again, Onika, let me start with you. Just your closing salvo, something optimistic in terms of what the continent needs to do.
We need to adopt meaningful connectivity standard of unlimited access to the internet, with requisite digital skills, and a minimum entry-level smartphone as the device for connecting everyone.
Thank you very much. And that is succinct and that is very bold. And I think that is very necessary because at the moment, internet penetration sits at 39%. We need to at least get it to 51% by 2025. Dr. Busogi, I'm coming to you. What is your closing salvo? What do you think Africa needs to do next?
Thank you. So for me, it's two things. One, it's something that everybody's always keep talking about. Everything starts with education. We really need to improve our education. The second thing is, like, there is a reason why Africa is always not taking advantage, whether it's the first, industrial revolution, second and third, it's not going to change. We have some fundamental problems. So we have to kind of go back and see why did we fail to take advantage of the third, industrial revolution. And most of the time, the answers are still the same. So this is not a new problem. And we basically dealing with the same problem, and we need to go back and fix those. It's not a new problem. Most of them are actually existing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So I take it it's, legacy issues, legacy problems, political will, but education, education, education. Let's teach our young people. Let's get our capacities building. Olivier, I'm coming over to you. What's your closing salvo?
Well, I will say that we need to address the access to data and computing technologies. This is an element which is important for the fourth industrial revolution. We also need, like the previous one said, technical know-how. We need to uptake our skills, etc. And we also need to address the governance and regulatory challenge. We can follow the example of the EU, China, and the US. They are the leaders in this topic. But like I said previously, we have our own context, we have our own history. We should take the lesson from them, but adapt it to us to make sure that we get a human-centered approach to the 4IR.
Thank you very much for that. The localization of a global context, I think, is what I picked up from there. And I think it's an important way to go, just to make sure that the context is relevant to us. Gerald, you've got the closing remarks, or you've got the closing message here.
Thank you, Garikai. I think the first and most important thing is we have to actually invest. Our governments need to invest in a digital economy. They have to be what we would like to call the investor of first resort. The success of most, tech economies is because the government has invested financially as well as in the right policies. So we need to make sure that investment, and to Onika's point earlier, they have to champion this. African heads of state have to champion this in a very meaningful way and in ways that show. The second thing is, I think we have to collaborate better across various levels, from the grassroots right until the top. We have to collaborate across sectors as well. There was an issue that an area that Onika mentioned, which is infrastructure sharing. Because of technology, you can actually do that. As you are setting up access for power, you are also setting up connectivity for data and internet. So collaboration is the key, especially if we're going to be looking at this at a continental level. And as Pan-Africanists who want to see the success of all African people. Thank you very much, Garikai.
Thank you for that, Gerald. It's been an honor sharing this panel with this esteemed group of panelists. Onika, Moise, Olivier, Gerald, thank you very much for your insights. I think there's a lot that we've discussed, but a lot more still to be discussed. And I think let's continue this and continue to drive the work for Africa. And for everyone who's watching this particular panel, thank you very much for joining us at the all.ai 2021 Virtual Summit. And we look forward to discussing more about the fourth industrial revolution and the digital economy for Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Smart Africa and the panelists, for that wonderful session.